Will the Falcons coaches step up to inspire more confidence in both the Falcons' present and future?
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everyone, to another illustrious episode of the Locked On Falcons podcast, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. So, guys, if you don't know me, I'm your very humble host, Aaron Freeman, a.k.a. Mr. Drew, a.k.a. Sirius Black, a.k.a. the Jolly Green Giant, a.k.a. Mr. a.k.a. And I've been covering the Atlanta Falcons for a very long time, formerly at falcfans.com, RIP. Still going strong on this illustrious podcast. And I think each and every one of you that go strong with me as everydayers, that means you make it your first watch or first listen each and every day. And to become an everyday, all you got to do is subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. So today's episode, we are going to give some suggestions to ways that the Falcons can improve their offense, which I think they'll need to beat the Eagles on Monday Night Football. We will talk about, hey, Zach Robinson, be who we thought you were going to be. But we'll start off talking about, to me, what the story of this game is, which is piggybacking on those 2 points, which is you're going to need the Falcons coaches to step up. And will they step up, right, this week? That's, to me, going to be the best way that the Falcons are going to be able to beat this Eagles team, because I don't think this Eagles team is a team that they match up well. This is why throughout the entire summer since the schedule came out, and it didn't matter whether the Falcons were playing week 2 or week 12. Like, I wouldn't have predicted this game to be a win for the Falcons just because I don't think they match up well with the Eagles. That's why they have consistently struggled against the Eagles over the last 15 or so years. And, a big reason for that is because the strength of the Eagles has been, during that period of time, consistently their trench play. And that's been a consistent weakness for the Falcons. And while I think their trench play has gotten better in recent years, it's still not quite to the level where I feel confident that they'll be able to control the line of scrimmage in a way that they need to in order to beat this Eagles team. And, the one area that you would say that the Falcons have a distinct advantage over this Eagles team, because I think most areas where you would look at these teams and how the Eagles receivers match up with our secondary, or how, the Eagles offensive line matches up with our D-line, and vice versa, and all that stuff. Most of those matchups favor the Eagles. I just think they have better players than the Falcons do at those positions. But the one where you would say, hey, the Falcons have a major advantage here is probably the one area of the Eagles roster that is weak, which is their linebacker play. That has been consistently a through line these last couple of years. And you like Bijan and Pitts and others against those guys. But like the handful of times that the Falcons have had success against the Eagles in the last 15 or so years, like I think they're 4-8 against the Eagles going back to like 2006. 3 out of those 4 wins, like the thing that was most notable, that probably your biggest takeaway from all 3 out of those 4 wins was Julio Jones being a dude, right? And so it helps when you have that type of guy. And Julio consistently had a lot of success over the years against the Eagles. And sometimes it was, to the degree that he was making the pivotal plays, smoking Namdi, smoking Byron Maxwell, getting the walk-off, touchdown on that screen on in 2019 and whatnot, that he's making the signature plays that win the Falcons the game. And the Falcons don't really have a Julio Jones on their roster right now. That guy that can just simply take over the game and be like, this is the best player on the planet and you can't stop him. And he's going to get us a win. The closest version of that is Bijan Robinson, right? He's the closest guy of being that type of guy. But part of it is because we play in a passing league. It's harder for a running back to sort of take over games like that today in the NFL than a pass catcher or a receiver can. Although, at least looking at the box score of, Alvin Kamara today on Sunday, running back can still do some damage. And so it'll be important for the Falcons to get Bijan going, and hopefully he'll be that dude and be the best player on the field come Monday night. But you also need other players to step up, and you're going to need the coaches to really do a better job of helping those guys, shine, rather than just simply like, hey, Julio, or hey, Bijan, go out there and be a dude, right? Because if you're just going to simply try to line up and pound the rock or beat this Eagles team into the dust, like I don't think you're going to win that type of game against the Eagles, right? And you need to get your guys in advantageous situations, right? And my hope is last week like last week's game plan was seemingly the Falcons like, oh, we're just going to line up and beat the Steelers. And, we talked about this going into week one, like, don't drink the Kool-Aid on the Falcons. And I feel like this coaching staff was drinking the Kool-Aid because, all offseason long, we heard about, hey, we just needed to fix the quarterback situation and the rest of this roster is playoff caliber. And it isn't, right? Like, that's what we learned week one. And the coaches need to do a little bit more to make this team a playoff caliber team than just simply like, we're just going to line up and beat you. And you need to be able to find the weaknesses in the Eagles, and exploit them, right? And I think one help that you get, one aid that you get is, not having A.J. Brown, who's going to be out on Monday night with a hamstring injury. And that was one guy that was a dude that you were basically looking at as a Falcon fan and being like, I don't know if we have anybody that can stop that guy, right? Maybe we can stop Devontae Smith, where we talk about A.J. Terrell. As good as A.J. Terrell is, we've talked about it consistently on this podcast for the last 4 or 5 years. He doesn't do well with physical receivers like A.J. Brown, right? Now, to me, the question, with A.J. Brown out, that's a big boost to the Falcons defense. Is it enough to feel confident about this defense going into this game? It's like, maybe. We'll see. I don't expect the Falcons defense to look as good this week against Philadelphia's offense because Philadelphia is just better across the board than Pittsburgh's offense and presents more of these challenges because of the talent that they have. But we'll see, right? Is it a step back for this defense? So basically I'm saying I'm expecting a step back. And is the step back like, oh, they just give up 24 points instead of 18 points? Or is it they give up 34 points instead of 18 points, right? And hopefully it's the former, not the latter. But, we'll see if the defense can step up. And that's not a knock on the defense in the ways that I'm sure some of you guys interpret it as, because we talked about the goal for this defense is, hey, we don't need you to be good. We just need you to be good enough to win games. And that's what the defense was in week one. And the hope is that will continue in week two. And again, I don't think that's going to result in not giving up a single touchdown. That's basically what I'm getting at. But if you're going to win this game, you're going to need a lot more from the offense, just because I don't think the defense can, contain Philly's offense to the degree that they were able to contain Pittsburgh's offense. And so, someone in the Locked On Falcons Discord, link in the description below if you want to join the conversation. But basically someone this past week termed it, and I think this is a good way of terming it. Week one was basically a race to 20. And if you got to 20 points, you were probably going to win the game. This week, I think it's more a race to 30. And if you get to 30 points, you're probably going to win this game. And so if that's the case, we need the offense to sort of step up. And, if we're going to jumpstart this offense, I have some suggestions on certain things that they ought to do differently. And it starts with play action. And we'll break that down as we continue today's Locked On Falcons. Guys, PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. They have over 5 million active members because it's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Because unlike other apps, it's just on PrizePicks, it's just you versus the numbers, right? You just pick more or less on up to 6 player projections, and you can watch the winnings roll in. And if you're looking to get in on some action because certain sports books are not available in your state, PrizePicks is, and withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. You can get your money in as quick as 15 minutes. And so this week, you're feeling good about Bijan being that dude. Hey, go more on Bijan's, getting 65 rushing yards. Or if you're feeling good about Saquon Barkley and Bijan both being dudes this week, you can do a combined projection and go more or less on them combining for 141 rushing yards. So check it out by downloading PrizePicks app today and make sure you use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL and you'll get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive that $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. And guys, I want to tell you about DoorDash, right? Scheduling can be a hassle in today's hectic world. As a daily podcaster, you spend a lot of time trying to come up with topics. You spend a lot of time trying to coordinate schedules with guys for crossovers, and you often find yourself looking at the clock and being like, oh man, it's been a couple hours since I ate. And then you play the game of like, can I run out and get some food or, but I don't have to play that game anymore because I have DoorDash, your favorite on-demand food delivery app, and while you guys probably aren't as worried about, finding the time to eat between daily podcasts, you're probably much more worried about, getting your game day favorites, your favorite foods, snacks, and drinks on game day. And especially on a stress-free Sunday where you don't have to worry about the Falcons ruining your day or ruining your meal, all you got to do is download the DoorDash app, order your game day favorites, use the promo code LOCKEDFALL24. You'll get 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order. Limited time offer. Terms apply. Promo is not valid for orders containing alcohol. DoorDash, your door to game day greatness, your door to more. Must be 21 or older to order alcohol. Drink responsibly. Alcohol available only in select markets. So, guys, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I have all the answers, right? If I could come up with perfect game plans, I wouldn't be sitting here doing the daily podcast for you, right? Locked On pays me well, but they don't pay me as much money as I could make, coming up with incredible game plans for NFL team on Sunday. But so a lot of what we're going to talk about in terms of suggestions is, to me, just like basic stuff that probably you sitting here probably at the end of the day, like, yeah, Aaron, all that's basic. I could have figured it out. You think you're the smartest guy in the world? Like, no, I don't. I just do some basic stuff and it'll probably work. But I don't think I'm the smartest man in the world, and I don't think Tyler Rowland or Tony Wiggins are the smartest guys in the world. But they are certainly giving you some good takes, some interesting takes on the new Locked On NFL. So check out the new version of Locked On NFL, 2 shows a week. Tony Wiggins, Tyler Rowland, covering all the other teams in the NFL, biggest stories, all that. Find Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. So the basic premise that I'm going to offer is, hey, just run more play action, right? And it goes to what I was saying earlier. Is like, you got to have some misdirection in this offense, right? That if you're going to just play straight up football, the players at this level are just too good, right? If you make football just see ball, get ball, the players at the NFL level, doesn't matter what team you're facing, are just too good. They're going to be able to see the ball and they're going to be able to get the ball, right? The only team in the state of Georgia that can play that, and I say this to Gino Camilleri, Locked On Eagles on the crossover, only team in the state of Georgia that can play that type of football is Georgia. And it's not because like Georgia is the world's greatest assemblage of talent. They just play at a lower level competition, right? Let's say there's 200 some odd serious football programs and they all have 100 players on the roster. That's 200,000 players. Well, how many of those players make it to the NFL? 1%. 1%. When you count up the 53 guys on 32 NFL rosters, that's 1% of all the guys that are playing college football. It's a bottleneck of talent. That's why we sit here, and when people hype up, the talent of this team, the talent of that team, it's like everybody has talent in the NFL, So that's why I say that, where it's like, if you're going to play a see ball, get ball type of game, like, you need to make it so that guys aren't seeing the ball, and that's how they don't get the ball. And play action is also going to be able to generate explosive plays, which are going to lead to points, which, as I suggested earlier, like, you're probably going to need more points this week. You're probably not going to win a 17-10 ball game this week against the Eagles. You probably need to win like a 30-24 type of game, more than likely. And, just running the football and not being able to dial up any explosive plays, without play action is going to be really difficult to do that, as the Falcons tried to do last week. Now, I know a lot of the conversation coming off of last week was, should the Falcons run more under center stuff? That's more something that Kirk's comfortable versus the shotgun and pistol. I think it obviously makes more sense to run under center stuff that fits what Cousins has done historically, but I don't think it's as simple as like, hey, if we just run more under center stuff, our offense will automatically click, right? I think that whole conversation is a little overrated for 2 reasons, right? The first one is, I remember the conversation was surrounding the Bengals in 2022 when they got off to a slow start, and everybody was like, oh, they need to run more play action from under center. And then they played the Falcons in like week 7 of that year, and they ran what little play action they did run from the shotgun, and they carved this up, and they continue to carve up teams the rest of the season. It was a non-issue. And so that's part of the reason where, like, I think it's less about, under center equals goodness and pistol and shotgun equals bad. There's pros and cons to all 3. It's really, do you know what you're doing, right? Do you know those pros and cons, and do you lean into the pros or do you lean into the cons of it? And that to me is the second reason, where it's the same conversation we have about defense, where it's like people make a big deal about, are you a 3-4 versus a 4-3? There's pros and cons to both. And it's really just like, do you know how to maximize those pros and limit those cons is what determines your success, not necessarily, hey, this scheme is inherently superior to another one. So that's what I mean, where I feel like the under center shotgun pistol stuff is overrated. I think the problem last week was not, hey, they didn't run enough under center stuff, or hey, they ran too much shotgun or too much pistol or whatever. It's they were too predictable based off of those things, right? They were 80% run out of pistol. They were 90% pass out of shotgun. They were 70% running out of 12 personnel, their 2 tight end sets. They were 70% run in those situations. They were 80% pass operating out of 11 personnel or 3 wide receiver sets. Like that was the problem, right? So to me, this week, if you come out and present 12 personnel, 2 tight ends out of pistol, based off of last week, that was, 80% of the time or more a run play. And this week, instead of doing that 80% of the time, maybe do it 50% of the time, right? And then the other 50% of the time, hit them with a little play action. And it makes teams think, hey, they're going to run the ball for those first 1.2 seconds. And that sucks up those linebackers, which again is the weakness of Philadelphia. And then you can hit them over the top with your crossing routes and all the stuff that we were hoping to see from Zach Robinson. So that's why I say it's all basic stuff. Again, you guys are sitting here going yeah, man, it's so basic. And that was the problem week 1 because it felt so problematic that we weren't doing really basic things that other NFL offenses do. And it's this is a red flag. This is a serious red flag. So we'll see if the Falcons can erase that red flag. But a lot of it is kind of boiling down to, we need Zach to be who we thought he was as we were entering the season. And one of the things that we were hoping to see from Zach is diversifying the run game. And we'll see sort of what other ways Zach can live up to expectations as we wrap up today's Locked On Falcons. So, guys, you're trying to get back into the stadium, or maybe you're trying to avoid the stadium nowadays. But hopefully the Falcons will turn things around so that you'll feel compelled to get back into the stadium. And, GameTime is going to help you do that by taking the guesswork out of buying tickets, whether you're into football, baseball, other sports, comedy, music, theater, whatever event is near you. GameTime is taking the guesswork out of buying tickets. One of the ways that they do that is giving you those panoramic seat views. What you see is what you get. You know what you're going to look at, whether it's Jesse Bates taking it to the house on a pick 6 or something like that. You can get that perfect seat so you can watch him run down the sideline, or Bijan busting that big run, or Kirk hitting, Drake London on a fade in the corner of the end zone. Whatever you're looking for, GameTime is going to help you out. And all you got to do is download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download GameTime today. What time is it? Game time. So basically, we need Zach Robinson to be who we thought he was going to be. And one of the things that we thought he would do, and we talked about this heading into week 1, was, diversifying the run game and how that should help the run game. But it's still, at the end of the day, you still need your offensive line to make the blocks. And unfortunately for the Falcons, after the first drive, the offensive line wasn't really making the blocks. And then it didn't help them because you weren't really diversifying the run game. Now, the Falcons did have a little bit more success after the first quarter, especially in the second half when they did start to diversify the run game. And, to me, the success they had after that first quarter was them diversifying the run game, so giving Pittsburgh a different look, and also Bijan being a dude and basically turning in 2-yard losses into 4-yard gains and whatnot. And so hopefully, rather than just spamming outside zone, which is what the Falcons did under Arthur Smith, that was one of the things we were expecting to change from Zach Robinson. And again, whether that's all on Zach Robinson because Dwayne Ledford is the O-line coach and run game coordinator, and maybe he was just like, hey, we're just going to do what we do best, and we're just going to spam outside zone. And then they realized, oh, we can't do that. And then they started diversifying. So start with the game plan, flip the game plan, diversify the run game, in the first half, see what works for you. And then if it consistently works for you, then you can start spamming it in the second half. So that's what I'm hoping to see this game plan. And so that's one of the elements that we thought Zach Robinson would change things. But to me, what all these concerns, all these red flags, all these issues that we're talking about on today's episode, ultimately it boils down to wondering if the Falcons' floor offensively is much lower than what we anticipated, right? And you guys heard me talk throughout the summer being like, my expectations are that the Falcons are going to have the 14th best offense in the NFL, and they can build upon that into the future. And 2025 is, to me, the year where they realistically, or more realistically, could have a top 10 offense. But and this wasn't the exact methodology I came up with that number, but just to simplify it and basically explain it, like part of me was thinking like, yeah, their floor offensively is like the 20th best offense. And the reason that number comes up is because you can go back to some years in Minnesota where Minnesota had an offense around that point. And so it wasn't a guarantee that Kirk Cousins was going to automatically lead to offensive success, just adding him, as Minnesota fans will tell you over the last 6 years. But it was like, okay, if their floor is 20th, their ceiling is maybe borderline top 10, like the 8th best offense. You split the difference, eye level, so to speak, 14, that's probably what they'll be. And again, that's not how I came up with that, but roughly sort of explains my expectations, why like I think they'll be, somewhat optimistic, but not so optimistic where it's like the best case scenario. And my concern coming off of the week 1 game is that floor is much lower and that ceiling is lower than what we thought it was. Like, and now I feel like, well, maybe the floor, because of concerns about the coaches, is they're like the 26th best offense. And now their ceiling feels like 14 would be, kind of the best case scenario based off of week 1. Again, I know it's early. And so like when you sit there and you go like, okay, split the difference between that. It's like the 20th best offense is now kind of what the expectation is, again, based off of week 1. And it's like, that's not good enough to make the playoffs. Unless you're going to have like the 3rd best defense in the NFL. And sorry, Jimmy. Like I don't think anybody thinks the defense is that good, but I know there's at least one Falcon fan that does. But unfortunately for that person, they don't have pockets. So so obviously, like to me, the concern with that is like, not only does that have short-term ramifications on the wins and losses, but that has major long-term ramifications, because if that's what this offense is going to be, that's going to matter whenever you think, whether that's we're 3 weeks away, 3 months away, or 3 years away from Michael Penix playing games, right? And, it goes back to the conversation we've had since we drafted Penix on the podcast, where, again, I think the perception among some folks is like, he's Michael Vick, which I mean, his name is Mike, he's left-handed, and he's black. So, there are similarities, but there are very superficial similarities. But like, to me, like Michael Vick was the type of quarterback that was like, just go out there and make plays, right? Be a dude, so to speak. Right. And he's at probably the most extreme version of that type of quarterback. And then at the other end of the spectrum, if we're going to compare him to another left-handed quarterback, or a non-white left-handed quarterback, is Tua Tagovailoa. And to me, Penix has always been much closer to Tua than he is on the Michael Vick on that spectrum. And again, not to say that you can map every quarterback on that spectrum, but in terms of like, Vick is just go out there and make plays, and Tua is a quote unquote system quarterback, and that's way to maximize him. I feel like Penix is more of that system quarterback, like Tua. And so if the system isn't good, it's like, can Penix succeed here in Atlanta, right? And that's why it's so important to me that you need to have confidence in the system. And to me, week 1 was kind of like the worst case scenario when it comes to building that confidence, because it's just like going again to what I was saying earlier, like they weren't doing basic stuff. And it's like, oh, this is a major red flag. But, moving forward, to me, at this point in time, the pivot off of that is not necessarily winning games. And not to sit here and say that winning doesn't matter, because it does, right? We would like to see this team winning games. But like, to me, I want to see these next couple of games start to rebuild that confidence that the week 1 did not inspire it, right? We talked about this going into the season where, I know a lot of people disagree with me on this, but like, to me, these first 6 weeks, like your best case scenario to me was like 3-3, right? To start the season, right? And so like, if you started season 3-3, like you were in a good spot, based off of how tough the schedule is going to be. And now I think based off of week 1, and again, maybe it's an overreaction. That's what we're going to find out tonight, or tomorrow, whenever you're listening to this podcast, Monday night, let's say that, we're going to find out whether or not we were overreacting to week 1. And it was just, hey, they just had, I don't know, whatever they were dealing with last week. I think one listener was like, maybe they spent too much time at Magic City over the weekend. I don't know. We can come up with all our conspiracy theories on what happened last week, but hopefully we won't be having that same conversation. But like, basically all that to say is like, I think now the concerns for a lot more people is like, instead of having that 3-3 start or whatever, which was the best case scenario, I think more people are much more concerned about that 0-something start. Whether you think that's 0-2, 0-3, 0-4, 0-5, whatever you think that is, it feels much more like, hey, that's a realistic possibility than it seemed like, 8 days ago or whenever going into the season. Even me, being Mr. Drew, that negative Nancy, did not necessarily see the 0-something start. Now, early in the offseason, it was much more of a pressing concern, but that was part of why we were feeling so much better about this team after the Judon and Simmons moves, because it was like, okay, well, we should be able to win some of these games. But, the basically what I'm sitting here saying is, if that's where we're headed, if we're headed to an 0-something start, right, there has to be some sort of silver lining. And to me, that silver lining is being like, okay, we're not necessarily winning games, but we're building something here. And to me, again, it becomes a process over results sort of situation. Not to sit here and say that we don't want to have good results. We do want to win football games. But if we're headed down that track, we need to have something that we can hang our hat on, rather than just say we're just losing games and we're not looking like a team that's building towards something. And that's why, to me, regardless of where you stand on should Kirk Cousins be the starter or whatever the case may be, you want to feel whatever you want to feel by the end of the season like the Falcons are headed in the right direction. And it's going to be hard to feel that way, even if you believe that Penix is going to be an upgrade over Penix, Penix is going to be an upgrade over Cousins, if you don't think he's going to operate in a good offense, right? Because again, whether you agree with me on Penix being more that system quarterback or whatever, but like, to me, basically, I'm sitting here saying, like, what's the point of Penix sitting and learning if we have a bad offense, right? Like, him sitting and learning this offense behind Kirk for however many months or years that he has to sit behind Kirk, that's not going anywhere if this is a bad offense, right? There's no the end goal is not going to be what we want it to be for Michael Penix or for this football team if we don't have confidence in the system, if we don't have confidence in the play calling, even if whatever you think is going to happen in the future. So that, to me, is kind of what these next couple of games are about, more so than winning. But again, part of that is because even if the team had won week 1, I still probably would be expecting them to lose these next 2 games. But we'll see. Again, any given Sunday, all that stuff and more. So we'll see what progress this team can make over the next couple of games, and especially Monday night, against the Eagles. And if we get losses, no one likes moral victories, but it's like we got to find something positive to hang our hat on. And if this offense, to me, again, the expectations on this defense were never, hey, they're going to go out there and win us games. We always thought, hey, this offense is going to be the thing that drives the bus. And again, a big part of why we thought that was because, hey, Zach Robinson, bring some of that Rams energy back, bring that competence, that hyper competent offense that the Rams seemingly have. Although, I'm looking at the score and they're getting blown out by the Cardinals. So maybe the Rams still have some work to do, but we need something to work towards, right? Moving forward, hopefully we can get, the Bengals, right? The Bengals are from that tree. Zach Taylor, they always start the season slow, and then they figure it out by like week 4, week 6. Hopefully we don't have to wait that long, right? Because that leads to the 0-something, if we have to wait that long. But hopefully we can start to see that type of progress. And if we do get to see that type of progress, it there's a lot less doom and gloom, a lot less feels like the sky is falling, as it kind of felt, coming off of that week 1 game. So we'll see what the Falcons wind up doing. We'll be back with your next Locked On Falcons being a rapid reaction. So continue to make us your first listen on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you want to get more insights in this upcoming Eagles matchup, make sure you check out the Atlanta Football Party Monday morning/afternoon over at Locked On Sports Atlanta, where myself, Tanisha Batiste, Jarvis Davis, and Tori McElhaney will be giving you our thoughts on the Monday night matchup. And then, of course, we'll have the postcast on Locked On Sports Atlanta immediately after the game. And then, of course, that rapid reaction, usually an hour or so after the game, that final whistle. So check it out. Locked On Sports Atlanta, Locked On Falcons. Check out Locked On NFL. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every